Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and good evening for all of us, for all of you who are joining us today. So welcome to our webinar on gender and inclusive stakeholder engagement in MBSAPs under the CUNY Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Olivier Rukundo. I'm the head of the Peoples and Biodiversity Unit at the Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, and I'll be your moderator today for this webinar. So in terms of some logistical and housekeeping issues, so that we can work in good conditions, just for you to know, interpretation is available in English, French, and Spanish. I'd like also to highlight that some key logistical issues for the workshop. If you have technical issues, please send a private Zoom message to Martina Echeniz, who's connected here. They'll be to be able to help you resolve your issues as quickly as possible. Please do not use the group chat, as this may clog communication. And your microphone will be muted during all the sessions. This will help that we ensure that we have no noise pollution with regards to sort of the proceeding. If you want to ask a question, you have the following options. You can type your question in the Zoom chat, and we will address them during the Q&A session, or you can virtually raise your hand in the control panel. We'll then ask you to open your microphone during the discussion segment of today's sessions. We have here sort of the participants and speakers to this webinar. So this is a big group, so it will be too long to introduce each participant individually. So in an effort to get to know who is in the meeting and still respect the time we have, the limited time we have, I'm kindly asking you to please introduce yourself in the chat. I'd like to also introduce the co-host for these sessions. Today's webinar is co-hosted between BioFilm, the Jeff 8 umbrella session, the NBSAP Accelerator Program, and the Jeff Secretariats. We have representative from this host with us today. We would like to say a few, who would like to say a few words to you all. First, we will have, love to have our colleague, Uxue Ortega, from the Jeff introduce themselves and say a few words from the Jeff to welcome us all. You have the floor. Sorry.
Hello, buenos días, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well? So, good morning, everyone. My name is Uxue Ortega, and okay, you can still, I'm here. So, my name is Uxue Ortega, and I am the Youth and Partnerships Analyst at the Jeff. So today it's truly an honor to represent the Jeff in today's webinar. And let me begin by thanking UNDP for its leadership in advancing gender equality across all your programming, because the work that you do, as we can see today in today's webinar, what we are going to see sets a strong foundation for a more inclusive and impactful outcomes. For those who don't know the Jeff, we are a family of funds that was established along the Rio Conventions on climate change, biodiversity, and certifications. And our role is to support countries in achieving global environmental benefits and in meeting their international commitments, including those under the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And at the GEF, we really believe that the gender equality and women's empowerment are not only a matter of rights, but also are a key driver for environmental impact. We are very proud to be supporting the implementation of gender-related mandates from the Rio Conventions and to promote greater coherence across the environmental sectors. And I would like to share some findings that truly reinforce this belief, because a new report from our independent evaluation office shows that projects that have a gender-responsive approach perform better. They have higher outcome ratings, and they deliver broader societal benefits. So the message is clear here. When we invest in gender equality, we are also investing in more effective and lasting environmental solutions. At the GEF, we adopted our gender equality policy in 2017, and we have made sure since then that every GEF project includes a gender action plan. And these plans are not just only about compliance and ESS, they're also closely aligned with each of the project's specific goals. So whether it's addressing land degradation or biodiversity loss, we have gender considerations at its core. So incorporating women's perspective, knowledge, and leadership strengthens our policies and actions. It makes the biodiversity outcomes more effective, ensures fairer distribution of benefits, and help us build a more resilient and sustainable systems. So our gender policy includes clear requirements. Every project has to have a gender analysis. Every project must include a gender action plan with indicators, and then we track results every year to assess how we are doing in advancing gender equality and women's empowerment. So I would like to also give you concrete examples on the programs that brought us here together. The GEF is investing $72 million to help and support 140 countries update their national biodiversity strategies and action plans in the line with the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Frameworks. And we are also investing another $38 million to support 91 countries in developing their biodiversity finance plans. And in both of these major initiatives, gender was not optional, it was built from the start, in line with our policy, but also with the targets 22 and 23 of the GBFA. So following our policies and the targets, under these projects, countries are expected to integrate gender from the early stages. Countries need to do consultations and plannings, they need to implement and monitor the gender action plan. And from the GEF and with UNDP, we provide technical guidance to help do this. We are also offering training workshops to build capacity at every level, from national and local. So gender mainstream is not seen only a box to check, but also a foundation for good policy. So as we join here today, I invite all of us here from the participants, from government, civil society, and international organizations to reflect on how we can make gender equality, youth engagement, and a core part of our work, and not only an add-on. We need to include every voice in this in the development on the NBSAPs. And at the GEF, we remain really committed to support these countries in building these inclusive, rights-based biodiversity strategies that leave no one behind, and they are built on a whole of society approach. I'm very excited to learn about the different projects that you're going to be showing today, and feel free to write to me or to the GEF if you have more questions about our programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Utwe, for the introduction. And again, as always, for the constant support of the GEF in terms of all the actions that support gender, biodiversity, and also with a view to ensure equitable conservation action and outcomes. I'd like now to invite Tanya and Mario, if you could please also introduce yourselves from the GEF Aid Umbrella Program. So if you could please introduce yourselves also so that people know who you are here in this webinar.
Thanks very much, Olivier, and very nice to see everyone here today. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. I think it's my old title that's showing on the screen in the slide here, but I'm Tanya McGregor, and I'm the Program Management Officer with the UNEP's GEF Enabling Activities Projects for Biodiversity, and working alongside UNDP for these projects, which are supporting countries to align their national biodiversity targets with the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and also update their MBSAPs and prepare their 7th national reports. So integrating gender in the MBSAP update process, as well as reporting on gender outcomes in relation to the CBD Gender Plan of Action, is an important part of the work under these projects. And I will hand things over to my counterpart, Marion, to speak on this as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tanya, and good to have you here. Marion, please, you have the floor.
Yes, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening. It's a pleasure to see you and see familiar names. So my name is Marion Marigo. I'm a senior advisor at UNDP and working hand in hand with Tanya at UNEP. So we're both working, or both teams are working on the GEF enabling activities. And indeed, the gender dimension, as Tanya mentioned, is extremely important for GEF 7 and GEF 8 programs. And I would encourage you to take very active part in this webinar today, but also join us for the following session, where we're going to present a bit more in detail what we are doing in terms of initiatives to provide support to the different governments, in particular, whether it is the work in the country and having this whole of government, whole of society, gender-oriented approach, but also what activities can we as global teams support you with, whether it is peer-to-peer or webinars like this one, or any other activities that would be relevant. I know we're short on time, so I hand over back to Olivier for the other presenters.
Thank you very much, Marion, and thank you for this Jeff 8 umbrella program and all the ambitious efforts that you're undertaking. I'd like now to invite Jasmine to introduce herself. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Olivier. Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine Blessing, and I'm the Gender and Safeguard Specialist with UNDP BioFund, where I lead our work on gender and biodiversity. BioFund supports over 130 countries to develop biodiversity finance plans that align national goals with sustainable finance solutions. And we know that inclusive stakeholder engagement, including women's groups, indigenous people, and local communities, is essential for meaningful impact. So that's why we're working to ensure that engagement is not a one-off consultation, but something that is embedded across every stage of the biodiversity finance process. So we also encourage countries to integrate gender into every step, including design at least of one gender-responsive finance solution. So today's conversation is super critical because it is inclusive action that transforms all our good intention into measurable progress. So very happy to be part of this conversation. Over to you, Olivier.
Thank you very much, Jasmine, and thank you also for all the support to this webinar. And of course, we look forward to continuing working with you, not only in the context of this webinar, but also further activities. I'd like to now ask Melissa Laverde to introduce herself. Melissa, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Olivier. I hope you can hear me well. Good time of the day for everyone, and many thanks for the opportunity to participate today in this webinar. My name is Melissa Laverde. I am the Governance and Membership Lead at the NBSAP Accelerator Partnership. I'm hired by UNEP. The partnership is a global coalition that is comprised of countries, institutions, and non-state actors that gather together to support countries in delivering their NBSAPs. We do this by accelerating access to tailored technical and financial support that is aligned with their national priorities. We offer a neutral and a demand-driven platform that connects country needs with targeted solutions and with suppliers of support from across our global network. And our members commit to work under 10 guiding principles, and one of which underscores the importance of respecting human rights and promoting gender equality across all stages of NBSAP planning, implementation, and review. So we're currently implementing a dedicated gender and biodiversity project with the support from the Government of Canada. This project aims to accelerate systemic change by fully integrating gender equality into NBSAP implementation. Currently, 7 countries from diverse regions are participating in this initiative, and it's focusing on 3 main objectives. The first one is strengthening technical and institutional capacity by establishing teams that have the tools to integrate gender-responsive approaches into biodiversity planning and governance. It's also about enhancing participation and leadership of women through multi-stakeholder dialogues and through the co-creation of gender-responsive solutions that are tailored to each national context. And it's also aiming at fostering global learning and knowledge sharing between the countries that are participating, but also across the partnership as a whole. So this initiative is not only ensuring that women and marginalized groups are meaningfully engaged in biodiversity decision-making, but it's also helping to build more inclusive, effective, and sustainable solutions by recognizing the deep interlinkages between gender and biodiversity. The project is currently being implemented in collaboration with UNEP, UNDP, and the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. And of course, we're happy to share more details about this work and our work in general in upcoming webinars. we're eager to learn, of course, from you today and to collaborate to finding solutions for increased gender responsiveness across NBSAP implementation. Thank you so much, Oliver. Over.
Thank you very much, Melissa, and thank you for all of you who have introduced yourself this morning. I know we're short on time. Just want to make sure, can everybody hear me well? Okay, good. Of course, today we'll have other speakers. We'll have speakers representing Women for Biodiversity. We'll also have, of course, a country representative who will be with us to share their experiences. So this is going to be a rich sort of webinar. So in terms of the webinar, this is the first of a two-series webinar on gender in the CBD and countries and BSAPs. This first webinar is aimed at emphasizing the importance of inclusive stakeholder engagement, particularly the meaningful participation of women and the engagement of groups in achieving equitable biodiversity outcome. So I think it's also a very important step in terms of grounding us in terms of the Kuming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the Conventional Biological Diversity with regard to gender consideration. The second webinar, which will be coming up in September, will build on the one on the outcomes of today to reflect lessons learned, and then we'll also hear from participants on their own experiences in implementing gender-responsive conservation action to engage cross-collaboration and learning. Our hope is that this series will contribute to building enabling environment to strengthen capacity of practical information, including cross-sector collaboration, and action to apply gender indicators, monitoring and budgeting. So we're very excited to have all of you here to contribute to this. So to achieve these objectives, and we have here on the screen the agenda of the webinar. As you can see it, where the best place to place ourselves, as we had also heard from the welcome from our host. We will soon move to a brief moment of audience engagements where we'll ask you to reflect on your awareness of gender links to biodiversity. So we ask you to be prepared to engage. Once we heard from all of you, we'll move into some presentations, starting with an overview of the from me on gender and the Kuming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, but also gender in the overall context of the conventional biological diversity. And then we will also have a short presentation from UNDP gender consultant, Laura Cooper Hall, on a high-level overview of the ways gender and biodiversity interact. Laura's presentation will then flow smoothly into a panel discussion where we will hear directly from partners like Women for Biodiversity Director Tina Ray and country representative from Costa Rica and Eswatini on what they're doing to address gender in conservation planning, all moderated by UNDP Andrea Aguilar. Once we've heard from these various experts, we'll then have some time for Q&A to make sure that all your questions are answered. We'll then close with some information on the next steps. So I think, conscious of the time, it's important that I'll ask all our speakers to keep time in mind when we are engaged. So as I warned you, we would like to start with a short interactive activity to understand your experiences. Please use the Zoom whiteboard or chat to share one example of where you've seen gender biodiversity or conservation work interact. For example, how has women's group been included in terms of influential implementation? How gender differences have shaped in biodiversity planning? Do you have an example where an animal plant has successfully been protected thanks to the dedicated work of women? So these are just examples. Laura will share a whiteboard for us where you all can add notes using sticky notes to respond to this prompt. And if you have trouble with the tech, please feel free to write your responses or idea in the chat if it's easier for you. We will monitor the chat and make sure your input is still captured. So let's just give you just a few moments to sort of see what comes through. So I think we have already some ideas about women as knowledge holders. We have issues of land ownership and entitlement of women featuring here. I see some are typing. I hope colleagues can also help me with the chat if there's anything that comes up. So there are some issues with regards to representation, that women may be less represented in senior level in a biodiversity related institution. The fact that women lead conservation initiatives in many communities. Says women, youth, and indigenous community not being invited in early stages of project planning, which seems to be an issue. So that's more like a challenge rather than so there's the issue of funding, of course, that's coming up here. And then the fact that women are disproportionately impacted by biodiversity loss. The distinctive role of women in terms of in society, their roles, for example, in terms of culture and other tasks that are often assigned to women. Yes, in terms of exclusion, in terms of women not being allowed in spaces where decisions are being made. And then we have also the fact that women are agents of change and for mainstreaming. The idea of also practical consultations is being sort of reflected here. Again, the issue of knowledge. Yes, and then there's in terms of negative perception towards women when they're involved in biodiversity conservation efforts. So that's another challenge that's been highlighted here. The patriarchal structure in consultations, that's in terms of decision-making, lack of recognition of women's contribution, gender-based impact of biodiversity issues. Again, I think that speaks to the exclusion issue. So I have also, yes. Yes, the issue of also this very important cross-sectoral intentionality and the way in terms of mainstreaming gender, I think that's also something that's coming up. Food security has been highlighted and the role of women in terms of community resilience and contributing for sort of community resilience, fisheries, and one area that's actually also sort of highlighted here. Yeah, the role of women in large processing biodiversity products. So we are like now referring to biodiversity value chains and the role of women in that regard. Access to land. I think the issue of land tenure has also been reflected here. Yes, again, land access, education training in terms of impact on biodiversity production. So there's some cross-cutting issue, and I think the issue of land is coming up quite a bit here. So that's quite interesting. In terms of capacity building, of course, the inclusion of women in terms of capacity building and training is also coming up. So I think that's a very, very good sample of representation. So because of time, I would suggest that we move to the next session, where I will be presenting some few slides on the gender in the Kuming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This presentation is aimed at basically providing an overview of how gender is featured in the Kuming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework for us to have a grounding and an overview of some of the issues that are under consideration. So next slide, please. Next slide. So first of all, I'd like to sort of start by sort of highlighting that oftentimes in terms of the Kuming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, we talk about targets and goal, of course. Those are very important, but one of the key sections that was negotiated when the framework was adopted was Section C, which is titled Consideration for the Implementation of the Framework. And then it's highlighted there that successful implementation of the framework will depend on ensuring gender equality. And this is an empowerment of women and girls and on reducing inequalities. Why is this important in terms of the Kuming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework? It's important because during the negotiation, there was a wide recognition that issues related to gender are cross-cutting and actually cross-cutting across all the framework. So that's why a section and overarching Section C language was very strong in terms of recognizing gender. And of course, we have specific target like Target 22 that talks about ensuring the full, equitable, inclusive, effective, and gender responsive representation and participation in decision making in regards to Indigenous people and local communities. And of course, issues of women and girls, children and youth are highlighted in this target. And then we have Target 23, which is aimed at ensuring gender equality in the implementation of the framework through a gender responsive approach. What I'd like to highlight here is that, of course, we have the framework, but we have a series of decisions of the Conference of the Parties where certain issues are beyond and above the targets are dealing with issues of gender, or they have gender information and gender requirements in terms of what is requested from the Secretariat, for example, what is requested from parties with regards to mainstreaming the issue of gender in national implementation, including in the development of national biodiversity strategies and action plan, but also on ensuring that this information is reported to us at the Secretariat with regards to the national reports. So I just wanted to make sure that we all are on the same page in terms of that gender consideration, and just not only embedded in the framework, but they're also part and parcel of the decision-making process and reporting mechanism of the convention. And I think this will be discussed later on. Next slide. Yes, so as you know, at COP15, through decision 1511, there was a very important outcome. The Gender Plan of Action was adopted, recognizing the importance of advancing efforts to achieve gender equality and women's girls' empowerment to ensure the effective implementation of the Kuming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and of course, the full and effective participation and leadership of women in all aspects of the convention processes, particularly action at the national and local level. Again, the Gender Plan of Action came to anchor that idea that, the gender issues need to be implemented in all processes of the convention with this guiding vector, which is the Gender Plan of Action. Next slide. This is just briefly a bit of a timeline in which the Gender Plan of Action was sort of in terms of the process. And so you see there's some milestones that it took some years, and it went through other subsidiary bodies of the convention, including SBI, SABSTA, which were involved. Of course, there were the predecessor of the what we call the working group, the post-2020 at the time, which was the working group that was tasked to negotiate the global biodiversity framework. And of course, gender was sort of part and parcel of the discussion, since the adoption of the Gender Plan of Action coincided, of course, with the adoption of the framework. Next slide. So the structure of the gender plan of action it includes purposes, modality, expected outcome, objectives. There's some indicative actions, there are some deliverables that are proposed timeline, and responsible actors. So it's a fully fledged plan that actually takes into account issues related to sort of, grounding modalities and purpose, but also implementation related issue and means of implementation, including who is to do what and what actions require deliverables to be with a view for them to be measured. Next slide, please. So in terms of the modalities, very quickly, there's emphasis on maximizing synergies between gender equality and the conservation and sustainable use and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources. Basically, the interpretation of this is that gender equality is a cross-cutting issue in the implementation of the 3 objectives of the convention. So I think this mainstreaming issue is here highlighted. Of course, there's a need to ensure coherence and coordination with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the issue of applying a human rights-based approach, addressing intersectorality in ways into gender inequalities may be amplified. But again, the key point here, I think, is ensuring the meaningful and effective engagement and empowerment of women and girls from indigenous and local communities, which is a transversal issue that's being dealt with in the gender plan of action. Next slide, please. So you have different outcome and objective. I'm not going to read through all of them, but as you can see here, it's a cross-cutting cross-cutting issues are being reflected here. Issues of ownership or control over land, for example, technologies, in terms of access and benefit sharing with regards to making sure that women and other unrepresented communities get a fair share of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources, the issue of entrepreneurship, and then biodiversity-based supply chains, also the participation of women and girls in these sectors, and then also gender-based violence, discrimination that's highlighted. So again, a host of issues. What I want to highlight here that some of the objectives here transcend the issues of conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, but there are many economics and social sort of dimension that I highlighted here. Next slide. So in terms of expected outcome 2, this is more related to increasing opportunities, strengthen participation and leadership of women at all levels, integrate the human rights-based approach and gender equality in sort of one of the main instruments for us, which is National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plan. So again, cross-cutting and mainstreaming these objectives into the overall implementation of the objective of the convention. Next slide, please. So in terms of the expected outcome 3, in terms of objective, what needs to be done is to develop national capacity to produce and use gender and biodiversity data and relevant data disaggregation. As you know, the monitoring framework, which was agreed upon at COP16, deals with this issue with some indicators on gender. And as you also know, and I'm sure we'll hear from Tina on this later on, there's been a lot of discussion on how to increase the visibility of gender measure-related indicators in terms of the implementation of the framework, and most notably in terms of the monitoring framework. There is also issues of support to access to information and public participation of women. Again, here we and reporting of the post-22 CUNY Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. That's the language that was there because, of course, that was previously the language used before the formal adoption of the framework. Gender responsive implementation of the framework, reporting, as I also mentioned, and in terms of also resources and how to achieve all of this in terms of means of implementation, human and financial resources are also key. Next slide. So that's the end of my presentation. I wanted to be brief to give sort of the opportunity for other presenters to also, and the panelists, to elaborate more on what will be coming in. And then, of course, this is the perspective of the CBD. And so that's where we are now. So I'd like to now move on to the next session, if we can. And then we will have a moderated panel. So now that we have the overall policy context in which we're working in, we will move into a short technical presentation on the links between gender and biodiversity, followed by a short moderated discussion. As I said, for a short presentation, I will invite Laura to sort of take the floor. So Laura, you have the floor. Please go ahead with your presentation. And good to see you, Laura.
Thank you. Thanks, Olivier. And hello, everybody. I am Laura Cooper Hall. I'm a gender consultant with UNDP, providing support to the Jeff 8 umbrella program on UNDP side. So we just heard Olivier's fantastic presentation, positioning us within the political framework that gender and conservation action exists within, that we all kind of are very relevant to and doing work within. I'm now here to take us a step back a little bit to make sure we're all on the same page about what we actually mean when we talk about gender and conservation, biodiversity. My main key messages will focus on why it is important and valuable to be thinking about and prioritizing gender in our work. This will be rapid. We've already gone through a lot of content and there will be a lot now, but it's going to go quickly. But I'm always here to discuss any of these concepts further. Talking about these topics in the context of your work is one of my favorite things to do. And I also want to warn you before I get into it that I have a lot of questions actually for you all to consider throughout the presentation. So please be prepared to jot down your ideas. Yes, go ahead.
Can I just confirm with you that you're in the English channel?
In the what?
In the English channel, because we can hear you in the French interpretation.
You can't? Okay. Sorry about this. Let me see. Where should I be going?
If you go at the bottom of the screen.
Oh yeah, there you go. Now,
and then for the English channel, that would be great.
Yes. Is that working for everyone? Sorry about that. I got too excited. All right. Thanks, Marion. All right, so I'll start again a little bit, but I wanted to just make sure that everyone is prepared for a lot of questions that I'll have for you all. Please jot down your answers or your ideas in the chat. All ideas are great and all ideas are welcome. And again, I'll be going pretty quickly through this presentation, but I'm here to discuss any of the concepts further. Talking about these topics in the context of your work is one of my favorite things to do. Okay, next slide. So first question, wasn't lying when I said I had questions for you. I'm wondering if you all can think of some gender norms or expectations that you've seen in your work, but also you just have experienced maybe yourself. This is to really get us thinking about, how does gender relate to our work, to us, and how it's really part of everything that we do and the world and work that we exist within. So this is my first question, to think of some gender norms or expectations. Feel free to put those into the chat. And that should hopefully get our brains going for this presentation and the panel conversation. So as you're thinking about that and adding them in the chat, I'll keep moving forward. I see some chat coming through. Women expected to be caregivers, nurturers. Great. So sometimes when we think about gender, it can actually get a little confusing. Sometimes we're actually talking or thinking about sex rather than gender. And I thought it would be helpful to set us up with some kind of grounding information on the difference. So sex is the designation of a person as male or female or intersex based on a cluster of anatomical and physiological traits known as sex characteristics. And at birth, infants are typically assigned a sex based on the visual inspection of external genitalia. Sex is biological. Whereas gender is a socially constructed set of rules, responsibilities, entitlements, behaviors associated with being a man, a woman, or a gender diverse individual, and the relationships between and among people according to these social constructs. These social definitions and their consequences can differ among and even within cultures. They can change over time and intersect with other factors as well. Though these concepts of sex and gender are linked, the term gender is not interchangeable with the terms women or sex or gender identity or gender expression. These are all very distinct terms. So a gender norm is a societal expectation about how people should behave based on their gender. And gender norms affect and influence who tends to control or access things like land, natural resources, decision-making. And it's important to remember that in the context of biodiversity and conservation, gender does not operate in isolation. Overlapping identities shape access, interaction, and engagement. And this is all linked to this term intersectionality, which is an analytical lens that considers and addresses how a person's overlapping identities contribute to unique experiences of oppression, privilege, and access. And I wanted to get you all here some more questions, thinking about what does intersectionality really mean? And some good questions linked to that are, what are other identities that we all hold? For example, I have a master's in terms of my educational background. That's a component of my identity. I live in the United States. That's another component. And there are all kinds of different ways we can think about identity. And these are important considerations to keep in mind also as we're doing the work that we do. Another question for you to consider is, in a resource scarce environment, how might different types of identity affect people differently? Next slide. So I really didn't lie about my number of questions. Here are some other questions to just think about today throughout your work, to kind of prime you for thinking about inclusion and gender within the work that you do. So how might gender and social norms impact your goals and efforts? Questions are, who are some of the stakeholders and most vulnerable people impacted by your work? Why are they vulnerable? And by vulnerability, I mean the susceptibility or likelihood to be impacted or harmed from environmental changes or hazards. Other questions to consider, what are some gender norms in the areas where you're working? Again, gender relates a lot to culture, but also geography, so these can change depending on where you are. How might gender norms affect the programs or policies you support or design? How might gender norms affect the vulnerability of the vulnerable groups that you're considering? Who has power to influence decisions at different levels, at the community level, at the household level? When we talk about community engagement, who do we actually see when we're talking about or designing activities that focus on community engagement? Just some things to consider as you do your work. Next slide, please. So let's think a little more specifically within the context of biodiversity conservation. Again, I'll go through this quickly, but I feel very confident I can go through this quickly based off of all of that engagement we had in the interactive session that Olivier led us through. Clearly, you all already are very familiar and do a lot of thinking on the way that these concepts interlink and interplay with each other. But thinking specifically about women and how gender norms impact how women engage in biodiversity and conservation, we see that women often manage the household level, the household needs, including food and nutrition, household subsistence farming and food collection, household water usage. These are all different components that link really directly to our conservation and biodiversity work. They also often will lead volunteer community level efforts to address community and household needs, respond to shortages or emergency disaster relief, Women also will fill particular roles along the product value chain, such as in production, local level vending. And simultaneously, women also tend to lack formal land rights, financial access, decision-making power. They often will face workplace harassment, gender-based violence when accessing resources. So these are all things happening all at the same time and all very relevant to the work that we do. When gender inequality limits participation and power, we see that conservation really misses critical knowledge and labor. Policies are often less effective, less equitable, and opportunities for transformative action are lost. Next slide. I also really want to emphasize something that is a very important key message, is that women are not just vulnerable, they are key champions for conservation. Historically, maybe the way we started thinking and talking about gender in this space is thinking of women as this group that is vulnerable to impacts, which may be true, but they're also incredibly important. They fill many important roles for conserving biodiversity and contributing to resilience. Here's just a few examples of kind of data that show this, how though they hold less than 15% of environmental positions, minister positions, we've also seen that female mayors have contributed to a 30% lower rate of yearly deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon, and that countries with higher representation of women in government tend to have lower CO2 emissions. So really important for the work that we do. Next slide, please. So women play varied roles in environmental stewardship. Really want to emphasize, again, they're not just vulnerable, they're really important and already fill important roles in environmental stewardship or the responsible use and protection of the natural environment. They often hold unique and valuable knowledge across efforts to conserve, protect, create more sustainable environments, such as in food production, resource management, traditional ecological knowledge, and community leadership. There are some examples of how on this slide, and in the photo you'll see, this is a photo from a project happening led by UNDP in Costa Rica, and these are a couple women who are there to monitor water quality. I'll move on to the next slide. Thank you. So just to take all of that information, lots of information, and try to succinctly distill it into some key messages. The key messages are that inclusive planning, at least when we're thinking in terms of inclusion of women and thinking about gender, that all will lead to stronger biodiversity outcomes, that type of inclusion. It'll also lead to improved governance and accountability through more equitable participation. So this all will lead to, or diverse voices, strengthen policy relevance, community buy-in, equity and benefit sharing. These are some great reasons to think about why we should be more gender responsive in our work or include gender. But another good reason is that gender equality, again, as Olivier presented, is part of the GBF and its gender plan of action. So updating your NBSAP to be gender responsive is an opportunity, and it is also an obligation. So I'll close, next slide, with surprise, more questions for you. These are some questions to kind of get you thinking again about the work that you do. So the questions are, does your draft NBSAP acknowledge women as valuable partners, not just a vulnerable stakeholder? Are you thinking about who might be currently left out of certain consultations you're hosting to generate your NBSAP? And what is one step you could take to make your NBSAP more inclusive? So I'll stop there, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Laura, for the great presentation and for the great questions and that you're raising here. So I'd like now to that we transition to a moderated conversation with Tina, Director of Women for Biodiversity, and country representative, as I mentioned before, from Eswatini and Costa Rica. And for this, I'd like to, before I leave it into the very able and capable hands of Andrea in terms of moderation, while we hear from our speakers, please share in the chat what are some of the challenges or successes you have experienced in integrating gender into biodiversity planning, and so that we can actually have that information. And I think some of these questions have already been sort of answered in some of the comments from the chat. But if there are some more, please include them in the chat. So Andrea, over to you.
Thank you so much, Olivier, and thank you so much, Laura, for setting the stage. I think both Olivier's and your presentations are just showing us how much we've advanced in terms of knowledge, in terms of political commitments in relation to gender and biodiversity. And that is not something that has happened by just mere, like casual action. It has been in great part, these political commitments, this knowledge is based on the work that countries are doing to identify these links, to include gender commitments in their biodiversity agendas. So we thought that this workshop was extremely important for this webinar to have a section where we could listen from the countries, listen the work that has been done, perhaps in the last 20 to 30 years, to listen to how they are implementing the new commitments under the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Global Framework, and also looking into the future. What is happening in this very special year where we are updating our NBSAPs, defining our biodiversity goals, and of course, developing our 7 national reports. So we have a fabulous panel today of colleagues that are going precisely to share these country experiences that have been these motors of change, of transformation of our national biodiversity agendas. And we have, as Olivier was saying, our colleague Mbali Mambusa, she's the project manager of Eswatini National Trust Commission. We have Tina Ray, she's the founder and director of Women Biodiversity. Rafaela Sanchez, she's the senior gender specialist and coordinator of the technical unit for gender equality at UNDP Costa Rica. And I have the honor of moderating this wonderful panel. And my name is Andrea Quesada. I am part of the global gender team for UNDP. So let's just jump in. I know time is short, but we will try to just carve space for these great presentations. So it is, something that we've known that most of the efforts in countries are not a single shot or are not limited to one project. And they have been more of a transformational path that countries have engaged in. And I think our first panelist today is an example of this long-term game and these long-term goals. And I would like to invite Rafaela to join us and to share us how has Costa Rica been integrating gender in the country's biodiversity agenda in the last perhaps 20 years? Rafaela, welcome.
Hi, Andrea, and hi, everyone. So nice to be here and sharing the Costa Rica experience in a little time with you. The main consideration we think women must to be at the heart of biodiversity, and all I'm going to talk about is going to be around that. The next slide, please. Costa Rica is a country recognized worldwide for protecting natural resources and has pushed other countries to advance this agenda as well. In the recent years, almost 20 years, as Andrea says, Costa Rica has recognized the importance of promoting gender equality and women's empowerment in the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Promoting gender equality implies not only mention it as an issue or as a priority, but as a principle, but prioritizing the identification of the relevant gender inequalities and proposing concrete actions to address them. And this is the work that we have doing in the country for almost 20 years. With the support of UNDP, the country have been systematically shift the way to approach actions on biodiversity for gender equality and women's empowerment using a multidimensional model to influence that action at the policy level, at the institutional level, and also at the community level. Designing clear and innovation proposals to integrate economical, social, and nature-based solutions into one. This is our goal. And also thinking in the implementation of these actions to benefits and reach all the women in their diversity. How we do that? Integrating gender equality into nature policies processes, national programs, and with financial mechanisms. Also developing proper tools and strengthen multi-sectoral capacities to integrate in the good way gender equality in the environmental national actions, and also promoting gender equality and gender transformative and gender responsive actions as a catalytic result to maximize environmental transformation. As you can saw in this figure, that is a timeline, you can saw how we be integrating gender equality in this process. Between 2010 and 2016, several national environmental policies and strategies recognize the importance of gender as a cross-cutting issue. But in 2018, several gender analysis and gender gap assessments was undertaken with the environmental sector. Also, and a very important consideration, and a specific target for gender and biodiversity was included in the national policy of effective equality between men and women in Costa Rica. And that is a very important consideration because this is a national gender policy, not an environmental policy. It's a gender national policy. So this was a very important goal. And other important consideration, as the many as you can saw in the figure, to integrate a gender specific chapter in the 16th report for the CBD was a very important result. All that at the political level. Important for us, and saw in this figure that you saw in your screens, at the institutional level, many other things we goes by. For example, the Gender Action Plan of the National REIT Strategy was launched in 2019. We support also the formulation of a very important executive directive as a legal mechanism to promote the closing of the gender gap in all the institutions of biodiversity sector. That has resulted at this time of the three institutions of this sector as a part of the gender equality seals of the National Institute of Women and also the UNDP seal, and the application of the gender parity in the collegiate bodies at the local level and the institutional level of the national system of conservative areas regulation here in the country. Also, it's very important for us to mention that the Ministry of Environment and Energy, with the support of the Biodiversity Finance Initiative, BioFin, will launch the unprecedented More Women and More Nature program. That is an unbreaking program that looks to transformation the country pathway to create resilient for women and nature at the same time, with three financial mechanisms to benefits nature and women and giving return also in the financial way to the institutional and the private sector engaging for reducing the gap for biodiversity. And not least, and was very important for us also, in November 2020, the National Forestry Financial Fund, FONAFIFO, has received a $54 million from the Green Climate Fund for the efforts that the Costa Rica has doing capturing 14.7 million metric tons of carbon through the country forest program between 2014 and 2015. Particularly, this finance was implemented, as you can saw also in the figure, in the last year as a RED program that is a result-based program. And this result-based program has a very strong commitment to gender equality and has very important results looking to engage women and also engage benefits of women in all biodiversity actions. For example, there is requirements for indigenous forest environmental plans, including the participation, uh, gender parity participation in women's in all decision making in these plans. Many bonus percentage of women and female firefighters or female uh, leaders in fostering actions in the country. And more recently, for the time, we are working right now in formulating the interinstitutional policy on gender equality for biodiversity sector. This policy is going to bring all the actions together that we are going that is going on right now in the country and put all these institutions, FONAFIFO, as I mentioned, and also the National System of Conservation Areas, and also the National Commission for Biodiversity Management to move the needle in gender equality, and also to the country will go forward to the target 23 that a global biodiversity framework has. This is a summary. There are many
This is
things,
amazing,
but
Rafa.
it's a little summary of the work that we have doing here in Costa Rica.
Thank you so much, Rafaela. This is amazing work. We could spend perhaps 20 minutes. I'm sorry I had to cut short the intervention, but this is we wanted to start with this case study, particularly because we have seen how you've created this ecosystem, an ecosystem that has policies, an ecosystem that has supported the governance and the institutional capacities, and an ecosystem that has translated, as you clearly said, principles to actions through different projects and, of course, through different initiatives that have been occurring recently and consolidated in a program. So this is a great lesson learned, I think, for other countries on how they can think of these transformational paths. So thank you so much, Rafaela. And I think it's the perfect segue to remind ourselves what you said in terms of going from principle to action. And under the new Coming Montreal biodiversity framework, we know we have these unique gender commitments. We have, for the first time, a target focused on gender. And many, again, agencies, civil society organizations have been supporting countries to translate these commitments, to implement these commitments. And I think that that's the perfect segue for our next speaker, our friend and colleague, Tina, founder and director of Women for Biodiversity. Welcome, Tina. How are you doing?
I'm well. Just to check, can you hear me clearly?
We can hear you perfectly. And, this is the perfect segue to ask you, Tina, how is it that Women for Biodiversity have been supporting countries in implementing or understanding the gender plan of action, the coming Montreal gender goal, and supporting them at this national level in this, transition and this path to higher ambition? Welcome, Tina.
Thanks, Andrea. It's wonderful to share the space with practically everybody I think I know on the panel and for setting the stage of what I may share. Hopefully, it is also going to be useful for those attending. I've tried to, in a very short time, I've tried to kind of focus on something that you'd asked was on the gender plan of action and its intention of how the implementation of the KMGBF could possibly be gender responsive to ensure that the whole of society would be part of that. Next slide, please. So all of you already shared this, but quickly, a quick reflection, because it's also very important to stress. And I think, I joined a little bit late, so I caught up from what Olivier was presenting. And again, setting the stage of saying that the gender plan of action, which is from 2023 to 2030, it's not something to just use as a reference. But as Olivier and also Laura talked about, it's also really very important that how this document actually gets operationalized. So that's where I'm going to be focusing on, but also quickly stating that the gender plan of action is an important decision of the COP15, and it is something that parties are advised, encouraged to definitely use it when they are not only setting their national biodiversity strategy action plans, but I think Olivier talked about is the next reporting, which is the 7th reporting cycle, which is due in February. So, again, once again, that like you talked about, the GPA recognizes the implementation part of the KMGBF, how important it is. It also addresses the full and effective participation. And it also is a document that is also there for the parties as we have global reporting cycles, but this will also help the parties to the CBD also for actions at the national and local level. So just very quickly, taking off from Olivier, that there are, the structure is that there are expected outcomes. There are 3 expected outcomes. There are 14 objectives, and very key important space I want to use today is for all of us to kind of go back and reflect maybe after this webinar, is to look at the 30 indicative actions that have been identified, which also are very important to look at of what not only parties, but as agencies, women's rights organizations, others could also take on, because the gender plan of action is actually good in that way that they have also identified who those responsible actors are, including the timeline. Next slide, please. So this is just at a glance. There are, like I said, there are 30 actions, and this is a quick, just a glance of what the GPA looks like. There are some ongoing activities, and I think some of them, Olivier also shared one of them. A key element is the appointment of the CBD's gender focal point, which was instrumental when the gender plan of action was adopted and Target 23. And thanks to the Secretariat also, there are now, and for me, it's amazing to see this, because I would say, even concerning the other conventions and MEAs, in a very short span of time, you actually have 72, the last count I did in June, of gender focal points, which are also your key points besides the CBD focal points in your own countries. So there are some of the elements of these ongoing activities for also for 2024. That was one of them. But also looking at that, this is a very good momentum for us to really start off from, is because there is this gap, the 2025, where there are no baselines, but some activities are going to get really heavy in 2026. There are 17 indicative actions that have been identified and hopefully that those will also contribute to the upcoming review of the Gender Plan of Action at the SBI, but will also be important for the Substa and the COP next year. Next slide, please.
Tina, you have 2 more minutes.
Okay. Oh my God, that was a very short time. Okay, all right. So please bear with me because I think I'm going to quickly go through these ones. So this is just kind of an example of how Women for Biodiversity has been working, and our work has always been around how does our work support or is supporting in some way some of these key elements of the Gender Plan of Action. So just quickly, briefly, this is what the text looks like. We have revamped it. We have made it a bit shorter. But this is something where I think Olivier talked about small elements in the Gender Plan of Action, but can be literally a long process of work. As he talked about sustainable use, conservation, which is under 1.2. And through that, Women for Biodiversity, we launched the Gender and Restoration initiatives about 3.5 years ago. And these are some of the products that we brought to the CBD COP, including the 6 partners to Cali last year. Next slide, please. This is once again a very, very important thing in the CBD process, is that where we not only talk about getting partners and sharing their own, launching their own reports, but we also have been working throughout our time is very much strong engagement and connections with the CBD focal points and the team. And this one is Bhutan, with whom also we've been working very closely on the indicator process. And we're also part of our side event at Cali. Next slide, please. Sorry, now I'm rushing, but hopefully you'll get these to look at it a bit more in depth. Now, a very key element was on the NBSAPs. So what we have really also tried to do is that wherever we have seen the opportunities to use our trainings or capacity building or information webinars, consultations, to always bring in the CBD element and of course the KMGBF and Target 23. And the left photo is from our field trip to our Cameroon partner, where we also encouraged them to organize, while we were there, to organize a meeting with the local governance body to share with them, So this also really helped them to actually, after we went, to forward to sign an MOU and start off some work. I think that international work also kind of gave them of how they were supporting the implementation of the KMGBF. And the next one is also really very important. Like I said, there are these wonderful, amazing gender focal points, but somehow the challenge is that usually in the sieving of who goes to the meetings, usually gender focal points don't make it. So at the regional level, we tried just actually this month, it hasn't ended yet, where there was an NBSAP knowledge exchange organized by IUCN, which is the Technical Support Center for CBD for Asia, and the NBSAP Accelerator. I see a colleague there. And with our support for Women for Biodiversity, we supported the gender focal point from the ASEAN, some of the targeted country that they were, and that was Laos. Next slide, please. I think I've got 2 more only. And this one is working on how, and some other a task, what we've really been doing around is building synergies with different processes. That was one of our key elements around Women for Biodiversity, is bringing the KMGBF to different spaces, and that's what we did at the UNCCD COP last year in Riyadh. And one of the other working forward is that we just launched the Women's Caucus for the Minamata Convention, understanding that the discussion around biodiversity conservation, restoration, protection, and also businesses, that there is also this need to build some of those human rights elements into the different other MEAs, and that's what we have done, and hope we'll be at the COP6 of the Minamata Conventions, where the Women's Caucus will be able to deliver a statement in November. Next slide, please. And one last one, very, very important one, once again, that Olivier talked about, is that on the how or what could be done for parties to do the NBSAPs. And one key important element task around that is the monitoring framework. Within the monitoring framework, there is a component indicator on the national implementation of the gender plan of action. So within that, we've gone through like 2 years of process. This is an ongoing process where we've been talking about that. We developed the indicator together with UNEP WCMC, with the support of the Secretariat. They've been wonderful. It went through an official peer review, and we developed it. We presented it at the COP last year. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm rushing quickly. My time was very short.
I am just going to ask you, Tina, to just wrap up, perhaps, because we are way past time. I'm so sorry. But if you could just wrap up.
No,
thank you.
Thank you. No, sorry, Andrea. And I'm speaking too loud, so apologies for the interpreters too. But anyway, this is just at a glance of the last COP decision, and you can take a look at it after the session. Next slide, please. And you can go to the next slide. This is where I wanted to show you where you can find it. This is who you can contact at UNEP WCMC for a bilateral training. Next slide, please. And with that, this is just wanting to give you a current status of which countries have actually targeted a specific gender target, some of with whom we worked with in the drafting. And I think that's the last slide from my side. Thank you very much. And yes, if there are any questions, happy to answer them in the chat or by email. Thank you, Andre, for the time.
Thank you so much, Tina. This was also such an enlightening presentation. And I think that it's amazing and something that I really, highlight from what you're saying is the importance of these synergies, is the importance of taking the process from the global level, understanding what it means at the country level as well, and how is it that you're building, again, these synergies with different stakeholders, with different partners at different levels, and how is it that Women for Biodiversity as well is exploring new areas of understanding, new areas where gender has to be included, and where we have to start by understanding these links. So thank you very much, Tina, for all of the work. We're very grateful for all of the work that Women for Biodiversity is doing in supporting all of these efforts. Great. Well, so now we saw the past, and we see the future, we saw the present, and now we're going into the future. And as I said, this is a very special year, and countries are updating their NBSAPs, defining their goals, developing their 7 national reports. And there are many countries that are committed to having gender at the center of these efforts. And to show us this future path, we would like to invite our friend again and colleague, Mumbali Mombasa, project manager at the Eswatini National Trust Commission, to share with us what Eswatini is planning on doing to keep this high level of ambition on gender and biodiversity. Welcome, Mumbali.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for the introduction. So thank you for the invitation to speak about our plans to integrate gender into our NBSAP and contribute to our reporting on our targets 22 and 23 for our 7th national report. I think before I just jump into the implementation plan, I thought let me give a bit of context on gender for Eswatini. And that gender issues are deeply intertwined into our cultural values and our social norms. And the majority of our key biodiversity areas are in communal land. So for us to enhance acceptance for implementation of the NBSAP and GBF, we needed strengthened attention to gender equality in our biodiversity agenda, and for us to have meaningful participation of women in biodiversity actions and decision-making processes. Now, through the technical and financial support of the Umbrella Program for the revision of our NBSAP 3.0 presents us a unique opportunity to actually address this. Now, Eswatini is also receiving support from the NBSAP Accelerator Partnership as one of 7 countries to accelerate systematic change for gender equality and biodiversity conservation through NBSAPs. We are executing this through a core country team. It's made of members from the Ministry of Tourism, Environmental Affairs, Eswatini National Trust Commission, Eswatini Environment Authority, Kango, which is a umbrella body for NGOs. We have Pelham Eswatini, the Gender Department is also involved, as well as Women Farmer Foundation. I think we had the unique opportunity of our timelines of the NBSAP Accelerator Partnership Project and the Umbrella Program aligning. So we thought it was prudent for us to actually leverage on those synergies, for us to have strengthened capacities and coordination with our efforts, and allow us also an opportunity to have some innovative actions that we can propose to address some of the problems that we find in the gender biodiversity nexus. Now, to speak to the slide, this is a snapshot of our plans for the next 7 months. In the next 7 months, as you see, we start off our August drafting a situational analysis of gender equality and biodiversity conservation. We will have consultations with women groups and women from local communities. Now, these consultations will also give us an opportunity to delve into some of the problems that exist in that nexus, and also give us an opportunity to see who's missing from the conversations that we're having to enhance our stakeholder engagement. Now, in September, this is when we will develop our gender transformative actions with our stakeholders, and also with Umbrella Program. We are planning on doing a capacity assessment for our gender skills and capacity of our national stakeholders that are involved in the NBSAP update process. Now, this will then inform the series of capacity building sessions for our various focus groups across sectors. Now, in October, when we do implement the capacity building, our aim there is to strengthen institutional capacity on gender equality and systems thinking around the issues that exist in that nexus. And in November, with the empowered stakeholders that are empowered in knowledge on biodiversity management, we will then assess if some of those strategic actions that we had set as part of the early action support project around targets 22 and 23, if those actions are still now relevant with the data that we've collected from August until October as part of the Umbrella Program and the NBSAP Accelerator Partnership Project. We'll determine, is there a need for us to revise them, and do they still align to our national priorities and the CBD Gender Plan of Action? Now, another key activity that will happen in November, we will validate some of the gender transformative actions that we had set in September, and determine which ones should be incorporated into the NBSAP. I've marked out December as different from the other months due to our cultural context. We are limited in terms of what activities can be done due to the events that happen in December. But we are still aiming to, in the first week of December, or the first 2 weeks of December, validate the situational analysis that we did in August, now based on a more informed, or the data that we would have collected through the process, validate that situational analysis, and also have our draft gender plan of action for Eswatini. Looking to the new year, the first quarter, one of our key activities that we want to do there is have an informal validation of this newly compiled gender plan of action with policymakers, so that the gender commitments in the NBSAP have buy-in before the NBSAP is taken to endorsement as a policy instrument in February. I hope I haven't used up all my time. Just to wrap it up and how all of this contributes to the 7th National Report. So Eswatini embedding their gender plan of action into the NBSAP and also the capacity building sessions, we are laying the foundation for implementation of the CBD plan of action, and hopefully allowing us to report with that midterm for the gender plan of action. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Mumbali. This is a very short but very mighty roadmap. And I think that many of the countries today in the webinar are appreciative of seeing how is it that you are supporting efforts to collect data, to conduct some consultations, to identify key gender elements, and to validate that at a national level. So with all of this information, you can inform the NBSAP, and you can inform the 7th National Report. This, colleagues, is not going to be the only time we're going to hear these country experiences. This is just the beginning. We have a second webinar that is going to focus on the how. So this has just been an initial conversation that we're starting today in the hopes that you can join us in our next webinar, where we will continue this. We will continue sharing more country experiences. But as you can see from the 3 examples today, it is not a single shot. It is these processes that are leading to transformation. So thank you very much to our 3 wonderful panelists. Please, everybody, just give them a big round of applause, and I'll hand over to Olivier to close. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you very much for this very enlightful panel. I think in the short amount of time that you had, you still managed to convey some very rich information. So I really thank you very much. I'd also like to point out that some other countries have shared their examples in the chat. For example, the Philippines, sort of highlighting the issue of land ownership. Tunisia, the fact that they've also have an interesting process that have aligned a national plan to the GPA of the convention. So I think that's an interesting perspective, and the example given here where planning is done with also the planning of the processes under the convention, and I think that's the best way to do it. Obviously, we're running out of time, but running out of time sometimes is a positive indicator of the interest and the depth in which we went. Of course, we had a Q&A sort of planned, but what we suggest is that you please share your experiences in the chat, and we'll share via email Q&A sheets that you can actually sort of fill in some of these sort of questions, sort of clarifications or experiences. As Andrea pointed out, this is not the only opportunity. What has been shown here is that there is a lot of engagement from all of you. So the second webinar would be an opportunity for that engagement, and I will be sure to revisit all the issues that we will raise via email or the chat. We'll make sure that, and the team, I'm talking on behalf of the team, of course, that we will actually collate all this information so that we can build from that on the second webinar. So I think this is a very positive sort of wrapping up and ending this very good webinar. It's been a pleasure for me, first of all, to be with you, to moderate these sessions with you. It's been a pleasure also to sort of hear from you, and because that gives us food for thought. Because as you know, the next step for us at the CBD Secretariat is the midterm review of the Gender Plan of Action. I think the second webinar will also provide a means to sort of provide more information for this. I'd like to pass it on to Marion for some closing remarks and some next steps. And I want to thank you, the organizers, for giving me the opportunity to be with you, and the participants and the presenters for all the wonderful contributions. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Olivier. And a particular thanks to you for moderating this webinar. And thank you to Andrea for being the moderator of this panel. Thank you to our panelists, and sorry for the short time. Again, whatever you have said and presented is highly relevant to where the countries are finding themselves right now in terms of updating NBSAP and preparing a national report. So we will make sure to share all of these relevant information, including the indicator on gender that Tina briefly mentioned in a follow-up email, where you also will access all of the recordings and presentation in the 3 languages. So very briefly, so we let everyone go. The second part of this webinar is going to be on Tuesday, September 2nd, and this webinar will be focusing on understanding what initiatives are ongoing and what support you can get from each of the supporting institutions. So that you can access and reach out to experts afterwards as you see fit. And we'll also have examples from different countries, again, because the voices of the countries are the most important and relevant, and this is where you can learn most, I think, from different peers. We were actually thinking that potentially a peer-to-peer might be interesting. So if there is interest indeed, do not hesitate to indicate this to us so that we can organize accordingly. And the very last little ask that I will ask for you is that whenever your Zoom screen is going to close, you will have a survey window popping up. If you can take just a few minutes, 2-3 minutes maximum, to answer the questions, that gives us an idea of how to run the next session better so that we can meet your needs better. So with this, I think we'll see you all on Tuesday, 2nd September, same time with interpretation. In the meantime, I think Alexi is going to drop, or has dropped already, the link of the Q&A in the chat. Please enter your questions so that we can liaise with our experts and answer and prepare the next session accordingly. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to all of the institutions and colleagues that have put a lot of time to organize this session. Thank you to all the participants that stayed online with us a bit later than planned. And we look forward to seeing you the next time. Thanks, everyone.